Hello, Michael Bode.
Hey, Barnaby.
So thanks for having another video conversation about allied work. Our last one was almost 6 months ago to the day, and I thought it would be interesting to check back in since we've both been exploring the practice, but also been meeting one-on-one to do co-explorations. And so we've had, you've really been, so for my Garrison Fellowship, my project is really to develop, share, and make accessible the practice of ally work. And you've really been the first person that I have been modeling a structure of one-on-one co-exploration. And from that time, about 6 months ago when we started, up to the present day, I feel like the energy of our has been a generative field for more people to come along. And I've certainly learned so much through working together. So you were the first, in a sense, of a first cohort of 5 people. And then in just the last week, another cohort of 5 people began these co-explorations, which are essentially meeting every other week for 8 sessions in total and having a peer-to-peer, non-hierarchical co-exploration of the practice of ally work, really as a support for our own individual practices and connecting with the ally. So in a sense, I created these because I didn't have this kind of support myself when I first began practicing, and I felt really alone. And I think the last thing I'll say is that my vision for this model is this decentralized structure where we can work together for 8 sessions. And let's say I'm the host and you're the guest, then at the end of those 8 sessions, then you could go ahead and take this simple structure, which just really revolves around simple inquiry prompts, reflections, and sharing. And then that guest could then become a host to support other people in the same way in receiving support around learning the practice of ally work. So really looking to do a structure where there's no certification required, there's no money at the center of the transaction. This is really, in a sense, a model that's reflecting the relationship with the ally. It's highly relational, and it's about connecting to the deepest parts of our being, who we are, empowering ourselves, and seeing how we can be of service in the world. So I wasn't planning a little spiel, but I just yeah. I guess maybe I'll just kind of ask you, since it's been about 6 months since we last had a video conversation, which we put out publicly. If we were just to pause in this moment, what would you say your journey has been with this practice of ally work?
Yeah, well, I love that it's been almost 6 months. That's really kind of sweet to take a moment to reflect on that period of time. And the first thing that comes up when you ask that question is this idea of entanglement, which you brought up last time we were talking on the phone. That like synchronicity or entanglement of our lives, or the support in the imaginal realm. And as you were kind of like developing your fellowship and starting to kind of explore how can you be sharing ally work with other people, and what are the forms, like you were just talking about, the interpersonal sort of forms. You know, I was also having an experience of connecting with the ally, and it just kind of happened, and I was sort of hungry for like, well, what are the ways that, you know, what is this, how, what are some people who have thought about this for a long time, or how can I talk about this with people? And so I just feel that we had this really beautiful kind of dance that was entangled over the last 6 months, and I'm super grateful for it, and feel fortunate that our paths have been together in the way they have over these 6 months. And to answer your question, yeah, how, reflecting back about ally practice, I was just I went out to the river, the Sandy River, outside Portland, just a couple days ago, and I was sitting down, I had my shoes off and my feet in the moss on the bank of the river, and I had my journal, and I was doing some ally practice, and was having a conversation with the ally about the journey I've been on with ally practice, which initially started out in the wilderness. That was kind of the birth of the kind of like more formal dialogue with the ally. And it's been winter, and there's been circumstances where I haven't been going outside much, but to go back outside just a couple of days ago is almost a similar feeling to what we're doing now. Like, oh yeah, look at this time that's gone by, and being able to reflect on how it's developed. And you know, one of the things that really stuck out to me in that conversation was I was having thoughts about kind of my work that I want to do in the world, and part of that is taking people out into nature, and talking with the ally about it, and the way that the ally could hold whatever kind of like human content I was working with, like, oh, there's a structure for like a business or like a project, and it could hold all of that with this larger perspective of being in relationship with the divine. And it was kind of this energy of like, cool, yeah, if you want to do all that stuff, great. And here's this bigger picture of like, how can I be in a deep relationship with the divine, and in whatever form that I'm working with people or whatever I'm doing in my life, like how can I be inviting them to do that too? And just the way that the conversation, the ally could just hold all of that and kind of talk about the whatever kind of details or things that my human mind wanted to talk about, and have this larger perspective of the kind of the biggest relationship, was just so, it's so beautiful to me. And that stands out as like what you know, my journey over these 6 months is to have a relationship with this being that can hold the biggest perspective. What a gift that is.
Do you find it easy to talk about the ally and the practice of ally work?
I'm finding it easy to talk about right now. I find it easy to talk about with you, and I guess this is going on the internet, so everyone can hear it if they want to. But generally, it's kind of, it feels kind of countercultural in a way. So no, it's not always easy. Or some people that I try and talk to, maybe they have an idea of what I'm talking about that's different than what I'm actually talking about, or I don't know. It's a little bit awkward sometimes. But also sometimes it's really feels really good to talk about, and is easy. What tell me about your question. What do you think about that?
It's funny, it just came up. I didn't really think about it. I find it, I guess if I just feel into it in this moment, I think what can be difficult for me as a human, is that there's so much conditioning for me, particularly growing up in Western cultural context, which is very focused on the material, and you could say a relationship to existence that's very object oriented. And so you brought up this word like entanglement earlier, and then I want to connect that to the word like relationality. And for me, this word ally is interesting because it's so easy for language to represent the ally as an object, as a thing. And what I experience in practice when I move from beyond thinking about the ally to being in a practice imaginal relational mode, then I feel like I'm in a sort of participatory living field. And then it's almost like I've entered into this implicit connection with the ally. And it's really just, there's a lot of clarity, I would say, and kind of harmony in the felt sense of this connection, this dialogue, receiving insight, feeling very connected, relational, supported, loved, big sense of possibility, which connects to that word perspective that you offered up, that greater perspective. So yeah, I think there's something almost like built in to how our language is. Maybe English is a particularly dualistic language, around how to use words that can really convey this practice and the relationship with the ally. Yeah, I feel like I really do like this language of quantum physics around entanglement and relationality. There's a phrase from the physicist Carlo Rovelli who says, all reality is interaction. And so it's this interaction with the ally that conveys a very deep sense of reality. And as I'm speaking those words, I feel like that's perhaps the simplest way I can, in this moment, like communicate what this practice means to me and what the ally is.
Yeah, I'd so appreciate you like speaking about that, because even just hearing you say that is kind of like dissolving some of the ways that my mind has gotten hooked on the language, right? Like ally practice, there's an ally, it's a thing, it's a being. But to kind of go directly to the experience like you're describing of what it feels like to be in practice and this relationality and this entanglement, that feels more real and almost like, you can't really put your finger on it with words in totally the right way. And there's something really special about that. Whereas getting stuck in the words can limit the experience, and letting go of those words can bring more of a possibility into the practice, which for me, that's like what the practice is, right? It's like, it's broadening, it's getting into that field of possibility or relationship with the more than physical world. So I just love that reminder to like, oh yeah, these words, like there's more. The words are just like trying to point to it. And sometimes they do a good job. Maybe sometimes they do a really bad job. And so maybe that's why, it's difficult to talk about what you and I are trying to talk about right now. or to talk about it like precisely, or to feel like we're really getting right to it. I love that quote, by the way. And maybe simply is the best way. Like that quote is quite simple and to the point. Something beautiful about that.
Mm. Mm. I have a rice cooker and it uses fuzzy logic to cook the rice. And I was reading a paper about quantum physics, and the authors were bringing some hard science, but also philosophical perspective to their inquiry. And if we think about the ally as like a being, a form of being, or we could say like a form of the divine, just as we could say human beings are a form of the divine. These scientists and philosophers were feeling their way into some deep questions. And one of them was, are there such things as essences? And so if we think of like a human as a kind of essence, it has some essential qualities. And the ally as a kind of essence, you could say they're two sort of like energetic hubs. What I really liked in this paper was the scientists said, actually, to say that there aren't essences is actually a form of like fundamentalist belief. So it's almost like if we were to and now I'm coming more from like a Buddhist background, and so sometimes in the deep Buddhist philosophical perspective of like everything is emptiness, we can almost feel like there's no essences. But what they were pointing to was, yes, there are essences, but the best way we can understand essences is not as things, but from the perspective of fuzzy logic. So it's kind of like we can have an approximate sense of that essence, but not a precise sense. So it's almost like, again, coming back to the quantum physics, as soon as the observer tries to fix, you could say, the identity of something, the potentiality of it has been curtailed, so to speak. So I'm getting into a little deeper philosophical kind of inquiry than I was expecting to, but I suppose in a way I feel called to bridge this conversation about the ally to the way we culturally think about things like scientifically and philosophically. But let me move back into our direct experience, and because you talked about you used the word feeling. So I want to come into that perspective, like what does it feel like to be in this relationship with the ally, and how does it feel for you?
Well, it feels in this moment, as I feel into it, it feels like if I could take all of the good qualities of all the relationships that I have with all the people in my life and kind of mush them together into one, that would be like the relationship with the ally. What I mean by that is like, oh, maybe I have a person in my life who is always there for me if I want to talk to them, or someone else has really good advice, or someone else is a good listener, or someone else, they're really loving or really have unconditional love. And the feeling I have with the ally is of a really kind of like close, trusted, loving companion. And there was a feeling that came up just a couple days ago when I was by this river, which was this. If I'm gonna have the metaphor of a friend or a companion, they never seem to mind if it's been a little while since I've hung out with them. There's no resentment like a human friend might have, or a pet might have. There there's just an openness and a feeling of love. That's a strong word that's coming up for me about it. Wow, I've really got quite a lot of blue on my face. Let me see. That's a little better. But I also, Barnaby, I just reflecting on what you were saying, I really, you went into the rice cooker and the other kind of scientific analogies. And I think that's actually amazing. And one of the reasons that I am particularly drawn to how you're approaching this practice is that bridge, like bridging the experience, or maybe even like a sort of mystical experience with experiences the culture's more familiar with, like science, or even like going into the history of all the different traditions and cultures that have talked about ally practice in their own language, or the indigenous wisdom that has some flavor of the ally. And that's really so valuable. I can reflect to you and to anyone listening, like as someone who's gone through these sessions with you that you've done, I think from my perspective, so much research and like thoughtfulness about the sort of like intellectual side, but also so deep into your own personal experience of the practice. And that bridge feels like, if the goal is to be sharing this practice, that bridge is in a really important part. So I just wanted to reflect how much I appreciate that.
Don't worry about trying to remove the rainbow in front of your face. And thank you. Yeah. I think what was coming up for me as you were speaking was there's something really interesting to me that, as we were both saying earlier, it almost is hard to, or it can be hard to talk about this practice to others. And as you said, I've been doing a lot of study, and it's really amazing and remarkable to me how universal this representation and relationship to what we are using the term ally, how universal it is. And so there's almost like a deep irony that something that is really at the heart of, you could say, global wisdom and spiritual traditions across culture and time, that I feel like people are going to feel like I'm crazy if I speak about this. And I think, particularly in the modern Western cultural context, we are living in a culture in which for centuries and millennia, access to this direct relationship to the divine has been actively suppressed, religiously, religious/politically, because in so many countries over time, those two were not separate. And I feel in the way that the feminine aspect of human beings is this connected to this intuitive direct connection to the divine that has been so deeply suppressed in so many cultures. And I've spoken with two people who I've connected with around this practice, and there's been this acknowledgement that this voice of the ally, or this relationship to the ally, has not just been marginalized, it has been erased. And I think that's just really important to name, and just kind of like to sit with, all of the ways in which the acknowledgement that a human being has an inbuilt capacity to directly connect to the divine, to receive guidance, to receive teaching, support, love, that human beings across culture and time have lost their lives, have had their lives taken because they have stood up for expressing that teaching and that possibility for others. And so in a sense, I do feel, despite the complexities and many problems of modern day America, just that we do have this right of religious freedom or spiritual freedom to express these views is actually something really that has not existed in many places and cultures across time. So we, in a sense, have a great privilege just to even have this conversation together and have it publicly,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I'm just going to kind of get a little bit more playful, because part of the energy that was inspiring me to have this conversation with you was certainly, as we're now in the season of spring in the Northern Hemisphere, kind of like feeling just the energy of new growth, and just a feeling for me, now having worked with 10 people, like this is time for more people to connect with this work. And I want to be a little playful and bold and perhaps even irreverent, but I just want to throw something out to you. So if we look back at the year 2021, so Netflix spent $17 billion on content. And, from my understanding, there was about $10,000 globally spent on the development of what we specifically call the practice of ally work. So I just wanted to be a little bit cheeky and put that out and see how that lands for you. Because I talked about how, let's say, politics and religion have actively suppressed this implicit connection to the divine, but we also live in a time when technology is saturating our consciousness and our attention with ways to capture our brains and harness the power of our dopamine, our serotonin, our love of beautiful colors and stories. And so much of the globe's attention is being drawn into things like the $17 billion a year that Netflix spends on content or various social media platforms. So you named this thing counterculture earlier, and I wonder what you have to say about what I'm kind of putting in front of you.
Yeah, well, on one hand, it's clearly a huge disparity in those two things that you named, Netflix and ally practice funding. But if we look at the year 2020, maybe there was $0 spent on ally practice. So there's certainly an increase, which is really exciting to me, that there is something building here. It is time for this practice to be shared. Also, the other thing that just stood out to me, that's thinking about all the content and all the different sort of apps and ways to get content on TV and social media and websites. And one of the things that's been really curious to me throughout my time doing ally practice, which has been almost a year, is how I am trained or conditioned to get information from outside versus inside. And so, whether that's watching TV for leisure, or having a question and saying like, oh, I'm going to go on the internet to find the answer to this question, or trying to find the way forward with a kind of like interpersonal issue or whatever the thing is. It's so tempting to look outwardly for the way forward, because there's so much information and so many voices and so many TV shows and music and movies and all this stuff that would love for me to give it my attention. And balancing that with the kind of like inner voice, or the inner feelings, or the inner wisdom that is inherent, I think, in all humans, is really fascinating to me. And I just love that you're, even in your comparison of ally practice and Netflix, there's that difference for me that's really stark, is where's the information coming from? And I was writing a website for this project Heartland, which I've been working on. And during the time that I was writing this website, I was in collaboration with my ally, and I wanted this project to be from the very beginning and in all aspects to be this collaboration with the ally. And so I was doing this writing, and I took a month away from as much content as I could. And so I was trying not to have any sort of nonfiction content that I was digesting, like podcasts, or I had all these great books I was reading, and I tried to put them down all for a month. And what I noticed is it kind of like took a little time, but I was able to tune in a different way to the inner voice that, for me, I think just gets drowned out from the volume and the enormity of the external sort of voices. So anyway, that's just what arose for me with your question. I think it's so interesting. And at the end of a long day, when you're tired and stressed, it's really easy to turn on the TV, and it's such a great way to relax, for me at least. And it's harder to listen to that internal voice, or it's like I totally I don't have a problem with all of this content. I love watching TV, by the way. But it's so interesting to me, having been in ally practice for these months, or this year almost, to notice how much I really value that inner voice and want to make that available, or feed it so that I can access it. And I'm really hopeful for your vision to expand this this sharing of practice and this co-exploring of practice. I think there are other people that long for that and don't really know how to do it, or have been conditioned away from it. Like you're saying, the various sort of religious or political or societal forces that don't really want to empower individual people to find truth and wisdom within themselves. So anyway, I just feel really, really strongly that there's a lot of value in what you're trying to do, and I'm very hopeful that it's actually a very good time to be sharing this with the world, and that people will pick up on that and either say, oh, I feel that there's some truth to that and I want to go deeper, or like, I long for that and I'm not sure how, but there's this depth of longing, and getting to explore that through ally practice. Or maybe we just need a Netflix show about ally work.
I want, like, there's this Netflix show I love called Love is Blind. And it's like, yeah, it's like people kind of like have these blind dates where they can't see each other. They're in these pods. So we just do a version where instead of a human on the other pod, it'll just be like they'll be in conversation with their ally. Why not? Such good entertainment. But yeah, I do want to reflect a few things you said. Yeah, I think one thing it is about like balance, right? And I think there's just a clearly huge economic forces that incentivize patterns in human beings to consume. And so I feel, in a very simple way, I feel like the essence of what you were saying, as I see it, is a practice like the practice of ally work can help us shift the balance towards being creators more than consumers. And that's really, in a sense, what is actually happening in the practice, rather than being passive consumers of images, meaning, and ideas. We are turning to face what Ibn Arabi referred to as our private face to the divine, which provides those same things, guidance, information, so deep information as guidance, images, so this is our internal connection to the imaginal, where instead of us just being passive receptors of images, we are actually getting in touch with the meaning containing images and symbols in the imaginal world that are very personalized for us. So rather than generic mass consumer images that we receive through our screens, these are personalized interrelational images that speak to us through our practice, that arise through presence and receptivity. And then, but not just our participation in images, but then when we say creation, we become creators. It's not just, oh, now I'm going to create a really clever Instagram account so other people can now consume my images. No, we are actually, what we are creating is not more social media content. We are creating our life. That is what I feel we become creators of, is how can our life go from one of, you could say, being out of balance, in which we are just, in a sense, living conditioned lives, to being more empowered to co-create our life in that ground of the divine. I'll say one more thing about that, which is that our life can then be a life that is oriented more towards service, because in one sense, we can get our needs of love, connection, belonging really met through this relationship with the ally. And then we are freed up and inspired to receive that creative or divine inspiration to live a life that is bold and reflective of our deepest heart's values, which is our interconnection, and then finding our own unique way to do that, which for me right now is, helping to share and create access to ally work. That's part of what you're doing, and you have your own calling to create kind of like an integrative approach to connecting to the land and nature in this deep spiritual sense. So we're both listening to our callings, right, of like our own unique individuated way to express our lives in a way that feels like expresses like meaning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I really like that word service. And I was a little bit surprised at first when I heard you bring that word in, but it really makes sense to me what you said about getting our kind of like deepest needs met ourselves and through that relationship. I was just thinking, like, what would the world look like if everybody had their need for belonging and love met already, well, how would that change the way that humans interact with each other, or what they choose to do with their time or their lives or their resources? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, and what I feel in this moment is, it's not like suddenly all of the world's problems are solved, but what I feel, what I see in this moment is what one of my mentors, Dr. Dan Siegel, talks about. He talks about the plane of possibility. So if we can align our attention, direct our attention to these dimensions of consciousness represented by this image or metaphor of the plane of possibility, that collectively, as humans, our individual and collective development can be much more like coming from that plane of possibility, which is another way of talking about that deep perspective that you spoke of earlier, that you receive through this relational practice with the ally. I don't know, what do you see? That's how I see a shift. What would you see as a shift?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, sort of what I'm thinking right now is like, how many of our bullshit systems would just completely collapse if everyone had their most kind of like inner needs met for for love and belonging and care, and it's just interesting. I wasn't thinking of anything in particular except for all of the sort of structures or sort of like patterns that I invest in or other people invest in because we feel like there's something wrong or that we don't have what we need. And that are often really kind of harmful ultimately to ourselves or other people or the environment. Yeah, I think it's interesting, Barnaby. Maybe we'll do another video after 10 years and we'll see what's changed, or even, I'm kind of joking about that, but kind of not. I really think that there's going to be more and more people using this sort of framework to talk about their experience, and with the model that you talked about of kind of like guests becoming hosts and expanding, there's going to be potentially a lot of people having the experience of having their needs met in a deep way, and hopefully you or other people that are in these co-explorations will get to hear like what changes for people, and I've only been doing this for under a year. What does life look like if this is a part of my life long term? How does that change things, or how does it change the people that I interact with? So I think that's really kind of interesting to think about, and I hope that you will have some really interesting perspectives too after continuing to share this work with people, with more and more people. Like you said, there's the group of 5, and now there's another 5, and hopefully you'll have an answer to this question after some amount of time. What does it look like for a person's life if they are in deep relationship with their personal face to the divine?
And I think what you're really doing, buddy, there, from my perspective right now, is you're putting out an invitation for each person to explore that, and I can say from my experience that really this, from the start, this connecting with the ally and being introduced to the practice was led to some really led to the biggest shifts in my life, right? Shift in vocation, shift in how I spend my time, deep shift in levels of confidence in myself, ever-growing shifts in, you could say, how deep my felt sense of entanglement in the universe, right? A sense, or to put it another way, a growing sense of experiencing the divine in across form, across forms, or yeah, just a more consistent sense of the divine, to put it simply. And just a limitless sense of possibility, right? So there's something very open-ended about this journey, and perhaps for folks who look at it from the perspectives of us living multiple lifetimes, there's an interesting question arises, like, what does it mean for our journey across multiple lifelines to build connection and relationship with the ally? So yeah, I just really want to kind of put that sense of invitation out for others, because I think in a sense for me, what was so fundamental at the beginning of practice, taking a workshop with Jeffrey Rath, was just this simple feeling of like, you have permission to explore this relationship to the ally. You have permission to do it, and you are valid in what you are, in what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, and the sense of empowerment and quote unquote reality to what is happening for you in that exploration. So the last thing I'll say, Michael Bode, is this comes back to being a bit irreverent, but I'm going to, again, it's been just a really important personal value of mine. I'm not saying it has to be this way, because I really value like a decentralized orientation to the sharing and development of bringing access to the practice. And so I'm really interested in like a model that's, you could say, has some resonances with Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's not about fees or hierarchy or authority. It's simply about people coming together to learn and share and grow. And so for me, in working with people, it's really important that this doesn't have monetary transactions, that it's offered from the heart. And again, with that imbalance between what's spent on Netflix content and ally work, I particularly have an imaginal image come to mind of European nobility. I think of like in societies past, where really it was like royal patronage, whether in Europe to like artists like, Mozart or Beethoven, or in China, where when Bodhidharma brought Zen Buddhism to China, and the patronage of the emperor was what helped to seed the practice. So I'm just sort of putting out this imaginal intention that, and this isn't, of course, about any particular person or economic resource. It's just sort of this image of patronage and support for the development of a form that is really, you could say, of the people, by the people and for the people, that is existing and growing in the same way that nature does, like outside of any institutions, outside the limits of human power, and that really is like of the human heart, and also of the support of, like you could say, like an interconnected network of allies that each person has access to in potential.
Yeah, I join you in putting that out into the collective field, that it can blossom and grow organically as it will.
Thank you. Would you like to share your website for anyone who might be interested in checking it out? I don't know how public you feel about wanting to share it at this point in time.
Yeah, I feel great about that. The project is called Heartland, and the website is heartland.eco. And yeah, it's just an invitation to take people into natural settings to connect deeply with themselves and the land. And, you know, it's pretty simple actually, but goes pretty deep. And I'm excited to work with anybody who wants to co-explore that space with me, including you,
sharing.
Barnaby.
No doubt. I'm very grateful we live in the same town, and I'm looking forward to getting to experience more of this incredible land that we're blessed to live in the state of Oregon. And I think in a sense, just to kind of close on a note, what you're presencing here, Bodhi, is, you know, when we are having today's conversation about what we're referring to as the practice of ally work, you know, what I'm particularly passionate about sharing is what I feel like is a simple form that Jeffrey Raff has shared in his work. And for me, I really resonate with that. And because I'm interested in kind of simplicity and access, this ability to build relationship with the ally through written dialogue, and I feel it's just in potential very simple and accessible for many people. But if we are to sort of open this up more broadly and see that what this is really about is a way for humans, again, to connect to deepest being, divine source, to receive empowerment in themselves, we know that this happens in infinite forms. And so I just want to highlight that this is just the way that I am feeling called to share because of my biases and personal connection. And I think your work is another form for people to connect. And really, when we talk about access, the doorway can be any door, right? And we are all arriving at the same place, which is the deep sense of home in our own being and the rightness of our being. So this is not a, there's no exclusivity to or priority that any door has to being. These are all just different pathways that any person may be called to at any point in time in their life journey. Yeah, I wanted to name that too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this feels like a good place to wrap things up. If anyone wants to check out where my more recently intermittent reflections have been, it's at allykind.com. And then, yeah, that's all I'll say for now. But thanks so much, Michael Bode. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Connect, and perhaps we can do this again every season or every 6 months, however it works out.
That sounds lovely.
All right, my friend.
All right.
I'm going to end this recording.